Good evening, everyone. And welcome once again to Bhagavad-gita Satsang. It's wonderful to see you here. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. It's always a pleasure for me to have you here with me and an honor that you have chosen to spend a part of your evening with me. And if you would do me the additional honor of hitting the raise your hand button if you can hear me, in order for me to feel assured that my words are getting out there. And very good. Thank you all very, very much for doing so. It's very, very nice to see you all here. Let's take care of our usual housekeeping. So a few of you are new to the satsang. Mia, it's very nice to see you here. You can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options up in the upper right-hand corner. I believe that's where you will find your controls. You need not worry about your microphone or your video camera because you can see and hear me, but I cannot see or hear you. You can make yourself heard by typing a question into the Q&A box. I do have the chat open just in case something pops up there. But if you have a comment or a question, go ahead and put it in the Q&A box, and I will keep an eye on that during the course of our evening together. And thank you all for reassuring me that you can hear me. Jess, how's your kitchen? Last week, we finished up chapter 10, the yoga of divine presence. We spoke about morality and its relationship to victory, silence, and wisdom. We also spoke about Krishna's expansions and incarnations and went into some of those explanations in detail. And we closed out with a spark of Krishna's splendor, and we're going to return to the final two verses in just a moment. This evening, we begin chapter 11, the Yoga of Divine Revelation, also known as the revelation of the universal form. Arjuna would still like to hear the details, even though Krishna has asked the somewhat rhetorical question, what is the need for all of this detailed information? With just a small portion of myself, I pervade and support the entire material creation. Well, Arjuna can't get enough. Too much is never enough, and he wants to hear more. So he asks for additional details, and that's how we're going to open this chapter. The particular details that Arjuna will ask for are proof of Krishna's identity. And we're going to talk about why Arjuna is asking about this. And then we will speak a little bit about the nature of the unlimited, infinite. We're going to cover verses 1 through 4. I thought last week we might get a little further into the chapter, but as I looked at the verses, I decided let's just focus on these 4. We will begin, as we always do, with our invocation mantra. And for those of you who are new to Sanskrit, transliterated Sanskrit with the diacritics that indicate the pronunciation. The dot over the M indicates that we close the back of our tongue to the roof of our mouth and back at the same time that we bring our lips together in front. The bar over a vowel, in this case an A, indicates a long open version of the vowel, in this case A, as opposed to a short version of the same vowel, in this case A. So, I chant, you chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The translation: I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the Son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence. The verses that we closed out with last week. Know that all powerful, beautiful, and glorious creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. So Krishna is speaking here about his opulences, his powers, the way he shows up as the most beautiful or most intense or most essential element of a thing. The Sanskrit word for this is vibhuti, also translated as powers. And there is a section, an entire chapter of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali dedicated to vibhutis, that is to say, how a yogi, through samyama, the combination of concentration, meditation, and samadhi on a particular object of meditation, acquires a vibhuti, or a power, over material nature. Krishna does not have to meditate on any object in order to attain his vibhutis, because his powers are an inherent aspect of his character, it's part of who he is. So we spoke about the most amazing aspects of material nature and different manifestations of power in nature, such as glaciers, and other natural occurrences that are filled with power, that are demonstrations of power, such as volcanoes, thunderstorms, earthquakes, such like that. These are also something that we can consider vibhutis. And what's interesting in this section is that Krishna is speaking about his powers, his energies, his magic. But Krishna is the magician, not the magic. He is the powerful, not the power. And so we spoke a bit about how there is a distinction between Krishna and Krishna's energies, and yet no distinction between Krishna and Krishna's energies, because Krishna is understood to be present in his energy. So this is an example of the philosophical point of view of inconceivable simultaneous oneness and difference. And what's curious here is that Krishna's energies work by Krishna's will, and yet Krishna doesn't get personally involved. That is to say, the energies are there, and therefore, in a sense, Krishna is also there by virtue of his energies, and yet this is not Krishna's personal form of Bhagavan directly engaged in doing these things. As we move into chapter 11, another name of chapter 11 is the yoga of theophany. Theophany is the revelation of God to a human being in a visible form, taken from the Greek, theos, God, and pheno, and I trust I'm pronouncing that correctly, appear. This would be an unambiguous manifestation of divinity, of God appearing to man in such a way as that there's no question who is appearing. There's no doubt as to who is being seen. The appearance reflects who God is. So a incontrovertible appearance. We hear about theophany in Western religions as well. In Christianity, when God appears in the form of an angel, or when the appearance of angels are interpreted to be an appearance of Christ in the Old Testament that foreshadows his incarnation when he appears in the New Testament. And there's a great deal of theological work in the field of theophany. And there are some ways that theophany in the Western religious traditions is similar or even the same as the conception of theophany in the Vedic tradition from which the Bhagavad-gita appears. One way that these conceptions are the same is that God, the creator, is, in his own divine nature, is distinct from the energies of creation and the creation itself. There is some indication, it seems to me, of the idea that the material world is a transformation of spiritual energy. There are other schools of thought in Christianity that say that God creates the world ex nihilo, out of nothing, as opposed to out of an expansion of his own energies. The Vedic version is definitely one of a transformation of energies rather than a creation out of nothing. So at the same time, when the Supreme Person or the Supreme Being shows himself through the agency of the creation and is present in the creation, still, even though the Supreme Person moves through the creation, God is not obliged or captured by the world. The Supreme Being remains completely independent from the material energy that he is appearing through or in. So similarly, a magician is not captured by the magic, by either the process or by the result. The magician is always in charge of the magic. And Krishna confirms this point of view earlier in the Gita. Back in the 9th chapter, verses 4 and 5, Krishna tells us, by me, in my unmanifested form, which is to say, not my personal form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. And yet, everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence, vibhuti. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not part of this cosmic manifestation, for my very self is the source of creation. So, in this way, the Christian concept of theophany agrees with the Vedic concept. Now, here's how it's different. In most of the Christian understanding of theophany that I have read, there is the idea that God is not directly visible to us without the created media. That is to say, the only way to see God is through the material energy. And without that material energy, there's no possibility of seeing the Supreme Being. This is where the idea of an impersonal Supreme Being shows up in Christian theology. And of course, it has its parallel in Vedic theology as the idea of Brahman as the only reality which we hear in Advaita Vedanta, or absolute non-dualistic Vedic philosophy. And it's the idea that the Supreme Being, who's not really a being, but is beyond being and beyond any possible distinctive feature, such as having a name, a form, any kind of qualities, relationships, activities, is higher than the manifestation of God in form with a name and with qualities who engages in relationships. The Sanskrit for this would be the difference between nirguna Brahman, that is to say, Brahman, the absolute reality. Nirguna means without qualities. Guna means qualities, nir is a negating prefix. As opposed to saguna Brahman, Brahman with qualities, sa with guna qualities. And the assumption is that saguna Brahman is how God appears in the material world, and that therefore we can perceive or wrap our heads around a recognizable form. And in the philosophy of inconceivable simultaneous oneness and difference, the lens through which I have been presenting the Bhagavad-gita, Saguna Brahman is not just how the Supreme Being appears in the material world, but how the personal form of the absolute truth manifests on the spiritual platform, that is to say, the transcendental relationship of the eternal spirit soul to the supreme spirit soul, is only possible if the Supreme Being is a person, indicating senses through which interpersonal activities can take place, which implies a form. A set of senses coherently organized is called a form or a body. In this case, a spiritual form, which implies that there is a multiplicity of beings with whom the Supreme Being has relationships, infinite and unlimited relationships, and a world, a spiritual world within which such relationships take place. So this is a little different from the theological assumptions that usually accompany Western conceptions of theophany. And I have a couple of examples for you. Long before Krishna speaks the Bhagavad-gita to Arjuna, he gives us a preview of his universal form when he reveals his universal form, or a portion thereof, to his mother. Here's what happens. Krishna is a little boy, and he's playing with his friends. And you know how sometimes, when little boys play together, they'll make up stories about one another. And sometimes they'll even try to get each other in trouble by telling the grown-ups that someone did something wrong, whether they did or did not. So Krishna's friends and his older brother, Balaram, go to Krishna's mom, Yashoda, and says, Krishna's been eating dirt. He's been eating mud. And so Yashoda goes to her little boy, Krishna, and says, have you been eating mud? And Krishna says, no, Mom, no mud. Haven't been eating mud. And she's not 100% sure she's telling the truth, because, little boys are not always entirely truthful. You walk into a room after hearing a loud bang, you see like a lamp knocked over, and you say, what happened? And a little child might say, nothing. So it's like that. So Yashoda says, prove to me you didn't eat any mud. Open your mouth. So Krishna obliges, toddles on over, opens his mouth, and his mother does not see any dirt or mud in his mouth. What she sees within his mouth is all moving and non-moving entities, outer space in all directions, mountains, islands, oceans, the surface of the earth. She sees the blowing wind, fire, the moon, the stars. She sees all the planetary systems. She sees water, light, air, sky, and she sees the transformation of the world by virtue of Krishna's mystic power. She sees the senses, she sees the mind, she sees sense perceptions, she sees the three qualities of material nature. She sees time and how time is allotted to all the living entities. She sees natural instinct and reactions to karma. She sees different kinds of desires manifesting in different kinds of bodies. All the different aspects of the cosmic manifestation are there for her to see, along with seeing herself in her village, Vrindavan, with her son and the cows. And she wonders what's going on here. So I have some verses from the particular portion of a book called the Srimad Bhagavatam, where this incident is described and where Yashoda's thoughts to herself are revealed, which are: Yashoda asks herself, is this a dream? Is it an illusory creation of the external energy? Has this been manifested by my own intelligence? Or is it some mystic power of my child? Let me therefore surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and offer my obeisances to him who is beyond the conception of human speculation, the mind, activities, words, and arguments, who is the original cause of this cosmic manifestation, by whom the entire cosmos is maintained and by whom we can conceive of its existence. Let me simply offer my respects, for he is beyond my contemplation, speculation, and meditation. He is beyond all of my material activities. It is by the influence of the Supreme Lord's illusory power that I am wrongly thinking that Nanda Maharaj is my husband. Nanda was her husband. That Krishna is my son. And that because I am the queen of Vrindavan, all the wealth of the cows and calves are my possessions, and all the cowherd men and their wives are my subjects. Actually, I am also an eternally subordinate spirit soul, subordinate to the Supreme Person, who is my ultimate shelter. So that it was what was going on in Mother Yashoda's mind. And then the next couple of verses describe what happens next. Mother Yashoda, by the grace of her son, Krishna, could understand the absolute truth. But then again, the Supreme Master, by the influence of the internal potency, Yoga Maya, inspired her to become absorbed in intense maternal affection for her son. Immediately forgetting that Krishna had shown the universal form within his mouth, Mother Yashoda took her son on her lap, as before, feeling increased affection in her heart for her transcendental child. So Yoga Maya is the illusory energy that facilitates a greater level of intimacy with the Supreme Person by letting us sort of forget that the person we're in relationship with is, in fact, the Supreme Person. Because if Yashoda is thinking that Krishna is God, the Supreme Being, how can she have affection for him as if he were a little child, her little son, dependent on him, on her, rather? We'll see how Yogamaya shows up in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad-gita as well, as we proceed through the chapter. if you have any questions about what we've covered so far, let me know. Meanwhile, Krishna gives another preview of his universal form, but this time as an adult prince, and just prior to the Battle of Kurukshetra that is about to be fought just beyond the pages of the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna wanted to help Arjuna avoid this war altogether. And therefore, he took it upon himself to make an effort to reach out to Arjuna's enemy, the aggressor, in this case, Duryodhana. Duryodhana is the son of Dhritarashtra, and it is by Duryodhana's desire to rule over the kingdom that is rightfully the Pandavas, that is to say Arjuna and his brothers, to rule over, that this entire war is taking place. So Krishna goes to the assembly hall of the Kauravas, that is to say Duryodhana, Arjuna's cousin, and all of his family and allies, with the idea that he's going to try to negotiate a peaceful settlement to their conflict. Duryodhana has no intention of entering into any kind of negotiation. He accepts Krishna as his guest only for the sake of trying to arrest him. So when he orders his men to restrain Krishna, Krishna's response is he laughs and reveals a portion of his universal form. In this instance, Krishna manifested a form that looked like, imagine if a person were a human-like form, but erupting like a volcano. He manifested this form of fire with innumerable arms, each with weapons that were glowing with a blinding kind of light. A vast array of demigods just burst forth from his form, and along with the essence of all living beings. Fire emanated from his mouth. Basically, he started breathing fire, and fire emanated from every pore of his body. And Duryodhana and his allies were so freaked out that they just closed their eyes. They couldn't look. They were actually scared to death, although they didn't die, but they were rightfully terrified. There were a few personalities who were able to keep their mental equilibrium, understanding what they were seeing. They were Bhishma, the grandsire of the dynasty and Arjuna's grandfather; Drona, Arjuna's guru, martial arts teacher; Karna, Arjuna's half-brother, the brother that was secretly given away by Arjuna's mother prior to giving birth to her sons with Pandu, hence the name Pandavas. Vidura, the half-brother of the king, Dhritarashtra, whose son Duryodhana is engaged in this aggression. He was, you may recall, the son of Vyas and the maidservant who came in the place of the princess, who couldn't handle another conjugal visit with Vyas. And Sanjaya, the narrator of the Bhagavad-gita, who is King Dhritarashtra's personal secretary. For those of you who are jumping in to our Gita Satsang kind of in the middle, you can go back to our classes 1 through 3 and get a complete backstory of the Gita and get more information about these personalities and how they fit into the story. So there were also sages who were present who could handle this, and they saw, therefore, this partial manifestation of Krishna's form, saw how the denizens of the celestial planets were showering flowers, and heard the sounds of kettle drums and conches vibrating as a celebration of this manifestation of divine power. The blind king, Dhritarashtra, heard all this commotion, showed up, and prayed that Krishna would allow him to see that same manifestation of the universal form once he understood what it was that was causing all the commotion. And for a few brief moments, Krishna granted him the vision to see this form as well. Krishna then withdraws this partial manifestation of his universal form, and after bewildering everyone, accompanied by his entourage, he leaves. He leaves disappointed, however, because he understands that Duryodhana is not going to compromise, and therefore the war is inevitable. And Duryodhana, once he regains his composure, does not understand the significance of what he has seen. He thinks it was just some magic trick by tricky Krishna trying to throw him off his game. So this brings us to this week's verses. Beginning the 11th chapter, I will read through the English translations, and then we'll look at each of these verses in detail. So beginning with verse number 1 of chapter 11. Arjuna said, "Out of compassion, you have revealed your supreme spiritual secret to me. The words that you have so kindly spoken to me have thus dispelled my illusion." Verse number 2. "I have heard a detailed explanation from you, whose eyes are like the petals of a lotus flower, about the appearance and disappearance of living beings, as well as about your inexhaustible grandeur. O Supreme Lord, O ultimate person, as you have thus described yourself, I wish to see your form of divine majesty." Text 4. "If you think that it is possible for me to see you in this way, O Supreme Lord, Master of mystic power, then reveal this imperishable form to me." All right. Oh, I have erred. I hate when that happens. I looked, before we get into the details of the verses, I looked for an image of Krishna revealing his partial universal form in the assembly of the Kurus. Couldn't find one, but I did find this. And this was kind of far out. This is a painting of this precise pastime of Krishna revealing his universal form in the assembly hall of the Kuru dynasty. And this is the artist who is standing next to his work before it goes up in the frame, before it goes up on the wall of a museum of spiritual art in Italy. Pretty far out. I'll give you the URL so you can take a look at it before we're done here. This was the only photograph of this painting that I could find, so I don't see a full screen one. But for those of you who are watching, as opposed to listening, you can see that it's a pretty far out psychedelic experience. Okay, and that brings us to the first verse of our chapter, which will be the verse we chant together, as is our usual habit. Taking a look at the diacritical marks in the Sanskrit, you may recall or want to remember that each letter of transliterated Sanskrit is pronounced, therefore all the H's will show up. The tilde over the N indicates a nya sound, and when it appears after a J, the J takes on the characteristics of a G rather than a soft J, rounded hard G sound. C's are pronounced CH, cha, and an apostrophe before the consonant indicates that a vowel has been dropped and the word that precedes it will now run directly into the word in front of the apostrophe. And that's it for diacritical marks for this time. So, I chant, you chant back. Arjuna uvacha mad anugrahaya paramam guhyam adhyatma samgitam yatvayoktam vachastena mohoyam vigato mama. We'll do it twice. Arjuna uvacha mad anugrahaya paramam guhyam atyatma samgyatam yatvayoktam vachastena mohoyam vigato mama. Our translation. Arjuna said, out of compassion, you have revealed your supreme spiritual secret to me. The words that you have so kindly spoken to me have thus dispelled my illusion. So, this brings up two items. One, the supreme spiritual secret. Remember that Krishna starts revealing himself in the 4th chapter and then proceeds to reveal deeper and deeper secrets, more and more confidential levels of knowledge about himself. As we transition from topics of karma yoga, jnana yoga, yoga of action, the yoga of knowledge, Raja Yoga, or the yoga of eightfold mysticism. Ashtanga Yoga is another name for Raja Yoga. We move into this section of bhakti as Krishna starts to reveal that he, Krishna, is the source of everything. Everything emanates from him. And that the wise who understand this perfectly engage in devotional service and cultivate love for him within their hearts. And Krishna reciprocates with those who approach him with love or the intention of cultivating love. He reciprocates by destroying the ignorance that covers their spiritual knowledge from within their hearts. As he puts it, he destroys with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So, this is Krishna's great secret, that it is he who is the source of everyone and everything. Everyone is a part of him, and he has a relationship of love, latent or active, with everyone, and those who activate that relationship through yoga feel his reciprocation through a revelation of spiritual knowledge. Okay, so now what's the specifics of the illusion that has been dispelled? Well, remember, all the way back in the beginning, Arjuna had 5 reasons for not wanting to fight. And he gave those reasons to Krishna more or less as follows. In the first chapter, verses 27 through 30, he expresses compassion, but material compassion. That is to say, compassion based on a material conception of life, on the idea that we are these bodies, and when the body dies, the person dies with it. In verses 31 through 35 of that same chapter, Arjuna objects to the battle on the basis of material enjoyment. There will be no joy in either victory or either defeat or victory. In 36 through 38, he expresses his fear of the bad karma that will be his to experience on account of his being responsible for all of these deaths. And for the next item, 39 through 40, he expresses his fear of social breakdown, the destruction of the family. And it will be his fault. Then at the start of the second chapter, he expresses his confusion. He's basically frozen. He doesn't know what to do. Any action he takes seems to be a course that will lead to misfortune. Therefore, out of confusion, he turns to Krishna and says, what should I do? So point by point, Krishna has told him, you are not this body. We are not these bodies. We are eternal spiritual beings having temporary material experiences. And you need to begin by looking at the world in this way. He then explains to Arjuna that because everything in the material world is temporary, the pursuit of material enjoyment is not the goal of life for one who is wise. As for bad karma, he explains that work done as an offering, as a sacrifice to Vishnu, does not cause bondage to this material world in the form of reactions. That is to say, an action that does not cause a reaction, a spiritual action, is an action that is done as devotional service to the Supreme Person. And that it is his duty to fight, but to do so as an act of devotional sacrifice rather than for any selfish motive. As for fear of social breakdown, it's beyond Arjuna's control. That's not something that Arjuna has any real say in. He only has a say in his commitment to the process, not how it all turns out. He's not capable of controlling the result. And therefore, by this knowledge, confusion has become clarity. Arjuna understands his role in all this, and now he understands what he must do. But he's not ready to do it yet. He wants to hear more from Krishna because he has now gotten a taste for hearing transcendental knowledge. And Arjuna is our role model. So our study of the Bhagavad-gita is meant to help us develop a taste for transcendental knowledge and transcendental experience by acting on the basis of the knowledge that we find in the Bhagavad-gita. So he's not ready to just start fighting yet. He wants to hear more. Which brings us to our next verse, verse number 2. Arjuna continues. I have heard a detailed explanation from you, whose eyes are like the petals of a lotus flower, about the appearance and disappearance of living beings, as well as about your inexhaustible grandeur. So, Krishna's eyes are shaped like lotus petals. Krishna means all attractive. Krishna is the most beautiful person. And a manifestation of the Supreme Person wherein beauty is predominant, That is to say, the power and majesty of God takes a back seat to the beauty of God in the form of Krishna. And even though Arjuna is seeing Krishna in his beautiful form standing before him, he has also come to understand that within that form is the unlimited power of the creator of the world. Text number 3. O Supreme Lord, or O Ultimate Person, as you have thus described yourself, I wish to see your form of divine majesty. So here, Arjuna is saying, I totally accept it. You're the Supreme Person. The word he uses for ultimate person is Purushottama. So this is a compound word. Purusha, person, Uttama, ultimate. So the ultimate person, or the first of all personalities, the most, the foremost of personalities would be another way to say that. Param Ishvara, Param, paramount, Ishvara, Lord. So he, Arjuna, is making it clear to Krishna that he accepts what Krishna has told him about his position. And even though he sees Krishna before him in his personal form, he wants to see the form by which Krishna enters into the cosmic manifestation. He has heard Krishna speak of his magic. Now he's asking the magician to show him how he does it. I spoke earlier about, this is why I like Penn and Teller, because they break every rule of magic by showing you how they do stuff. And it's fun to see how a magician does magic. Arjuna, of course, is not frivolous. He's not just asking for fun, the same way that I watch Penn and Teller for fun. The understanding given by the Vaishnava lineages, that is to say, the teaching tradition that is associated with devotion to Vishnu, is that Arjuna is asking for the benefit of others in the future. If you can reveal this universal form, then that should be proof that you're God. Now, there are plenty of people throughout history who have made this claim that they are the supreme being or an incarnation thereof. And here's how you respond to that. When someone says, I'm God, or when they say I'm an incarnation of God, or if they say we're all God, then you can ask, well, can you show me your universal form? Can you show me the way that you are omnipresent, that you create everything, that you are omniscient, the knower of everything? Show me how you're all powerful. Don't just tell me that you're all powerful. Show me. Now, of course, the qualification, as we will see in verses coming up, is that you have to be given the vision to see such a form. It's not something you can do with material eyeballs. So someone may say, well, you don't have the eyes to see. Okay, well, give me the eyes to see if you want me to accept you in your position. This basically is a way to call someone's bluff, because no normal person can do this. And it's a way of getting someone who may sincerely believe it to think it through just a little more. Because if we're all God, then we all should be able to do this. And, well, I just haven't met anybody like that yet. So, if you have any questions, I am keeping my eye on the Q&A box. Please pop them in there, and I will be happy to see what kind of an answer I can come up with. Meanwhile, we arrive at the fourth and final verse for this evening. Arjuna continues. If you think that it is possible for me to see you in this way, O Supreme Lord, Master of mystic power, then reveal this imperishable form to me. So here, Arjuna again addresses Krishna as the Supreme Lord, but he also addresses him as Yogeshwara. Yoga plus Ishvara equals Yogeshwara. So another compound word indicating that Arjuna understands Krishna to be the master of mystic power, which is to say that Arjuna understands that only by grace, by Krishna's mystic power, can Arjuna see the form of Krishna's mystic power. This is by revelation, not by Arjuna's effort. Arjuna himself can do nothing to bring about this vision for himself. It is entirely up to Krishna. And this is one of the interesting attributes of the infinite, that the absolute infinite is a person who can provide one with the spiritual vision with which one can experience the inconceivable infinite. And understanding that this is the case, it's not as if Arjuna is harboring doubts, such as I suggested a few moments ago, that I would have to anybody who suggests that they are God. Arjuna is asking, no demand here, asking Krishna, if you think it's possible for you to do this and for me to handle it, then please reveal this form to me. And in this way, Arjuna will be able to give testimony to anyone that Krishna is, in fact, the supreme personality of Godhead, the source of the power and majesty we associate with the position of God. That's the meaning of Godhead. So we'll see what Krishna has to say in the next verse. Let's field a question. And the question is, who is Arjuna to Krishna? And who is he in general? Thank you very much for your very excellent question. Arjuna is Krishna's cousin on his mother's side. And therefore they have a family relationship. Arjuna is Krishna's friend. They're buddies. They're about the same age. They have always had a friendly relationship, as cousins are likely to have. Pretty informal. Arjuna, in general, is one of the 5 sons of Pandu. Pandu was in line to inherit the throne, but due to his untimely death, Pandu's older brother, Dhritarashtra, who was not in line for the throne due to his blindness, temporarily kept hold of the kingdom. But Dhritarashtra wanted his own son, Duryodhana. to inherit the throne. And therefore the entire intrigue of the Mahabharata, which leads us, culminates in this battle of Kurukshetra, where the Bhagavad-gita is spoken, comes about. And in the course of the conflict that leads up to the battle of Kurukshetra, there are all manner of intrigues and assassination attempts and cheating that the party of Duryodhana engages in order to try and wrest the kingdom from Arjuna and his brothers, the Pandavas. And in each case, Krishna shows up to protect the Pandavas and the Pandava clan from a variety of intrigues and insults. So the entire, I covered the backstory of the Bhagavad Gita in the introductory classes. So you will receive a newsletter tomorrow with a link to the page on my website that has all of these classes, links to all of these classes on it. And if you go back to classes 1, 2, and 3, then you will get the detailed story of who Arjuna is, what the genealogical chart looks like, Krishna's relationship with Arjuna, and how it is that we arrive at the point where the armies have assembled on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna prior to the commencement of this battle. So I hope that that will be satisfactory for the time being, and that you will avail yourself to these earlier classes in order to get all the details. So I hope that'll do for now. And I certainly hope that you have some other questions, any of you who are listening now and joining us for the live portion of our program. And those of you who have questions after the fact, who are watching this later or listening to this later, I hope that I will hear from you as well. Tonight's class begins chapter 11, the Yoga of Divine Revelation, also known as the Yoga of Theophany or the Yoga of the Universal Form. Arjuna still requests details, but now we know a little bit more about why. We have discussed how the ability to reveal the universal form is proof of one's godness, and a little bit about the nature of the unlimited infinite, namely that the unlimited infinite has the power to reveal the unlimited infinite to one who is so fortunate as to receive that benediction. We covered verses 1 through 4. If you have any questions later on, please send them to me at hari@hari-kirtana.com. I am always very, very happy to hear from you. If you want to check out the Museum of Spiritual Art, you can go to Italy. It's in Florence. That's, of course, very appropriate. Or you can go to the website, http://Mosa Italy, MOSAITALY.com. And it's a pretty nice website and some pretty far out artwork on the wall. So please go ahead and check that out. Next week, I hope you will check out our class as we move further along in verses that are not listed here, as I have yet again failed to put what is on my cheat sheet onto the slide that you are wasting your time looking at, because it has the wrong information. We will talk about seeing whatever it is one wishes to see in the universal form. That was a curious tidbit that particularly caught my eye as I read through the verses that we'll cover. We'll talk about the limits of material vision and the light of 1,000 suns. We'll cover verses 5 through 12. And that concludes our class for this evening. Last call for questions or comments. And please write to me if you have any after the fact. I thank you all very, very much for spending this time with me here this evening, or at whatever time of day it is, for wherever you are, whenever you are. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening, day, week, month, life. And I look forward to seeing you all again next time. You are most welcome. Okay.